Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to BIOtechnical Advocacy Lab, our monthly series. We're so happy to have you here with us today. And this week, in collaboration with the Beekeeper Group, we're going to look at best practices for creating video content for advocacy. So today's speakers will help identify what you need to create a video to highlight your top advocacy issues from pre-production to distribution. And I will say, I know in this virtual environment, these skills are so important as all of us are filming on our iPhones, on our computers for advocacy. So I know I'm really looking forward to this. So today we're going to hear from Mike Panetta, who is a partner at the Beekeeper Group. He is an award-winning public affairs campaign strategist who specializes in using the internet and social media for creative issue advocacy and grassroots activism. He manages a number of the firm's nonprofit, trade association, and political clients and leads its embrace of mobile and social technology for political, marketing, and advocacy purposes. After we hear from Mike, then we're going to hear from Matt Chipolone, who is a senior videographer at the Beekeeper Group. Matt has a background in cinematography, editing, and producing. He specializes in helping organizations tell their stories and showcase their important work through film and media. So we have a great lineup of speakers. I really think you're going to enjoy it. There is a chat box. Please feel free to enter questions as you have them. And we will do our best to address all of them. So Mike, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. So great to be here today and talk to everybody about using video for advocacy. What I'm going to do today is essentially walk through the same process we do at Beekeeper Group when we talk about working to create a video for one of our clients or one of our issues that we work on. Basically walk you through the same process that we do in terms of thinking through the steps that are needed. So I lay them out here in terms of the 1 through 7, and that's going to be the outline of our presentation today. But I want to start with talking about why video is so effective and why it is becoming used so often now for advocacy campaigns and to tell stories in the advocacy realm. It really works like no other medium. So why is it so effective? Well, it's a great way to tell a lot of information in a short amount of time without much work needed on the receiving end. It's a very passive platform. And because we all have screens now everywhere we go, especially over the last 6 months, but even before that, we were never more than a few inches away from a screen at all times. That there was always somewhere that you could see a video story. The phone is usually the last thing people touch before they go to bed, and the first thing they touch when they wake up in the morning. So there's always a screen nearby. And then with social networks, these videos are easily spread and shared. So not only do we have the ability to watch them all the time, we have the ability to share them within our networks all the time. So it spreads socially, and then the algorithms across these social networks, they constantly show us the other videos that we think we should be watching. So video is so effective because it's so easy to share information, it's so easy to spread, and then the platforms that we're on all the time are always surfacing new videos for us to see. It's also powerful because it uses visual format, and our brains are wired in such a way that we process visual information so much faster. We process visuals a lot quicker. We remember them much longer, and we're more likely to act when through video content or visual information. So I have some stats on the screen here that I won't read every single one of them, but there's been a lot of thought put into this by advertisers. Madison Avenue has spent a lot over decades of research to show how we remember things and how we act upon things. So it's only 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we read, but 80% of what we see and what we do. So the visual components of video are very powerful because they take advantage of all these sort of things that are wired in our brains to begin with. Another reason why video is so great for advocacy is because it tells stories. It's an ideal platform for telling and sharing stories. Videos are used. There's a lot of complex issues out there, and videos and stories through videos make it easy to digest complex information in a much more digestible way. And stories. If you think back, we're talking about doing videos and advocacy videos. That's a relatively new thing in the public affairs and advocacy space. But the idea of telling stories for advocacy purposes really goes back to prehistoric times. So things like cave paintings and myths and Bible stories and fairy tales that passed down through generations before there's even written word. These were all used for advocacy. They were all used to enforce cultural norms, expected behaviors, ways for people to interact with each other. And in many ways, the Facebook feed is really the 21st century's version of the cave painting. It's a way for our society to sort of tell their story in short visual bursts. So another reason why videos used to tell a story are so important is because they trigger emotions, and that's a lot of what we're trying to do through our videos, is that we're trying to convey an emotion through the video we're creating, and that's very hard to do with a press release. That's very hard to do with fact sheets, but videos have the ability to do that, and that's important because videos impact a different part of our brain than fact-based arguments. Stories told through video and impact a different part of our brain. One that's if it triggers an emotion, what emotions do in our body are trigger feelings, and then what those feelings do are prompt us towards action. So it's a lot of the way we're wired. Is that, and that's how our bodies our mind and our bodies are created, or to and it's a sort of survival mechanism to the feelings that we generate inform the next actions we need to take as people. So that's why stories are so powerful, because they can trigger emotions which generate feelings which then drive people's actions. And so much of what we do, we like to think we're rational beings and we're weighing the facts of one argument and the facts of another argument. But the truth of it is, we really, a lot of the times, we rely on our gut feelings to make decisions, and that's sort of the emotional response loop we're trying to take advantage of when we tell video stories, is to convey that emotion and then drive people towards the action that we want them to take. And there's a proven concept for this called narrative transportation, and that's what we're trying to harness the power of when we tell a story through video. And these studies have proven that fact-based arguments, when you present somebody who has a strongly held belief with facts that counter their belief, even if the facts are indisputable, that person is not susceptible to changing their mind. And in fact, they will dig in their heels deeper and reinforce the belief they already had. But if you tell that through a story, if you take that same argument and you wrap it around a story and you humanize it and you show it with emotion and trigger feelings, and it's almost like a Trojan horse, that those facts and those points of view that you want to get across, they're able to sneak through and not run into the natural defenses that people throw up when you argue with them with facts. I like to say, if you're arguing over facts, you've already lost. It's that the best story is the thing that wins the day. And stories allow facts and arguments to come through unguarded, like a Trojan horse. So that these first few slides here were to show you, just to talk about the power of stories and the power of video and the power that they can be used when you harness it to tell a story. Now we're going to get into some of the key, get into some of the nuts and bolts of creating a video. We talked about the why of the video. Now we're going to get into the questions to consider when you're creating a video. And the first thing to keep in mind is, what's your goal? Like I said here before, lights, camera, action. You got to think about, why are you doing this to begin with? What's the reason? Why did you, as an organization around your issue, say to yourself, we need to make a video about this. What is the end goal? And then once you figure that out, you work backwards from there to put the pieces in place to make sure you're delivering upon that goal. And your goal of your video is sort of like the North Star. It should be the thing that you keep in mind and that guides you through the entire process, through all the steps I'm going to talk about next. And when you're talking about your goal, you got to consider your audience, your message, the messengers, the venue for where that video is going to be viewed, and the overall budget. And those are the things I'm going to talk about in the next few slides, starting with your core message. So when you create a video, what is the key point you're trying to come across? What are the things after people watch the video, what's the thing you want them to come away knowing or feeling? You need to think about this through the perspective of your target audience. And I like to remind people when we're putting videos together for them that you're not always the target audience. You have a goal of why you made this video, and that the video needs to be seen by a certain audience to deliver upon that goal. And that audience may not be you or the people around the table thinking about that video. It's likely a different audience. So you need to think about who is your, that we'll talk about your audience in a minute, but like that core message needs to resonate with that target audience. And then also, what's the end result? With that message, what's the positive outcome that you want to relay through this video? What is the thing at the end of the video that you want people to do differently or feel differently about? So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your core message. But once you determine your core message, you also need to think about who, like I said before, who's the target audience? Who are the people that need to see this video? Lots of the videos that we make for our clients there's really two, there's usually multiple target audiences, and that's fine, but you need to define, if you have multiple target audiences, you need to define that as well. But a lot of the target audience for the videos we make, for example, are decision makers. People on Capitol Hill, people in the regulatory agencies, people people in the media who cover this issue. We make videos that tell a story of our clients and the stakeholders that they serve. Sometimes it's people who are maybe your stakeholders are your target audience, and you want to show the hard work that you're doing in Washington on the issue. Each video has a different set of target audiences, but you need to define who those target audiences are before you start making that video. So as you develop the video, you keep that in mind and make sure you're developing something that's going to hit on that target audience. Next thing to think about is who's going to deliver your message in your video. Who are you going to have? That's basically who are you going to have on screen to tell your story and deliver your message. We always remind our clients that the third-party validators are really the most powerful advocates for your issue. So, your senior VP of government relations is probably not as strong as a message deliverer, someone to deliver the message as a patient advocate, for example, someone who's living with a chronic condition. If you work on those sorts of issues, lots of times we have videos where we have multiple people talking through. Well, maybe we'll have that senior VP of government relations, and we'll also back it up with some patient stories to have a comprehensive video. But thinking about who is, again, this goes back to your goal and your message and your audience. Think about who are the best people to have on camera to deliver that message. And lots of times they're already in your network, and sometimes you have to go out and find them. We're going to talk more about that later on in this presentation. Another thing to think about when you're considering the considerations of making the video is, where is this video going to be seen? We make videos sometimes that are designed to be shown in annual meetings on big screens in conference rooms when we can still do that. Sometimes they're made in a way that it's seen by an audience of one, someone looking at their phone and having headphones, someone looking at their phone with their headphones in. That's a much more intimate viewing experience. So that's the kind of thing that helps you think about what kind of video you need to craft. And that's especially important for when you're thinking about things you want to show on the screen. If you want to have an information-rich video with text placement, maybe some graphics or some visuals that need to come through, you need to think about how they're going to look on a small screen as opposed to a big screen. So thinking about where the video is going to be seen, not just on what screen, but in what environment with a large group or by themselves. That's the kind of thing to keep in mind as you're putting the video together. Last thing in this section of considerations is, what is the budget? And I like to say that videos can be made on almost any budget, but not all videos can be made on any budget. Even if your video has no budget, Even if your video is a budget of you with your iPhone, it still is a budget because you still have to budget the time to do it, the time to film it, the time to edit it. So everything needs resources. It may not need cash, but it needs some resources to do a video. But for most of the videos that we work on, some of the more professional ones that have lighting and multiple cameras, the kind of things you need to think about that drive the budget are how many days you need to film, the number of cameras that are going to be required, if there's any specialty equipment that's needed, if you the number of staff that's needed. I mean, we talk about staffing shoots later on in this video, but you could have a single videographer and that's it, or you could have 3 or 4 people and production assistants. You could have multiple people on a shoot, and that's going to obviously drive the cost up. And the one thing to think about with your budget as well, and again, even if you have no budget, you still need to think about this: are there resources set aside for promoting the video? How are you going to get this in front of people? We talk about that further on in this presentation as well. But when you're thinking about the budget, it is a good rule of thumb to think about what resources can be set aside to promote the video. So getting into pre-production planning. So now we've gone through the why of the video and some of the things you need to think about before you put a video together. Now we're going to get into some of the things like before you actually start filming. This is our next step in the process, thinking through what's needed in the pre-production. And by pre-production, what I mean before you actually pull out the cameras and start filming. So before we do that, the first thing we do is we line up our shots. If you want something to be in the video, you need to have a plan to make sure that it is filmed. It's not going to magically show up while you're editing the video if you didn't plan for it. So a lot of what we do here is create storyboards and scripts. These allow us to think through holistically what the video is going to look like when it's done, but in a way that's easy to do on paper. That it helps guide the filming, it helps guide the editing, it helps us making sure we're telling our story and make sure we are delivering on the goal that we set out in the beginning of the video. So we develop shot lists, what B-roll we need, what other visuals we need to have in the video. And so one thing, the next slide here is a blank storyboard template. And in this, each of these boxes represent a scene of the video, and then below it are the description for what's in that shot. And this is something, when we do a typical video, we may start off with a shot of Capitol Hill. We may then have a close-up of a patient advocate. We may do a number of different things and lay them out in the video. And you don't have to be very these could be just like stick figures. These could be stick figures. These can be really simple animations. It doesn't need to be fancy. If you see on the next screen here, this is an example I found online of what a storyboard is. And you can see it starts off like a wide shot, then a close up, and then a low camera angle. You don't have to do, you don't have to get into every single detail here, but what it does is it allows you, it forces you to sit down and think about what is this video going to look like when it's done, but what are the shots that I need to make sure I get before I put the camera away. So if there's any B-roll you want to get, a close-up of the Capitol, some shots of Capitol Hill, for example, if you're doing an Advocacy Day video, you want to set the scene with some background shots. All the things you need to think about is where the storyboard comes into play, because then you actually put it on paper and you can think through what do I need to get there. And then when you're filming that day, you can always refer back to this and make sure, we didn't get that close up of for example, here, number 4, close up of Sarah holding a photograph. Maybe we didn't get that shot, and we have to make sure we get that before we pack up for the day. The next section we talk about here is finding the right voices, and we talked about that a little bit earlier about who's going to deliver your message. And now this gets into sort of like, well, where do you find those people? You've already thought about who are the best people to deliver our message. Where do you find them? Lots of times when we put videos together, we make plans with our clients to find the voices at existing events, and obviously this is pre pre-COVID and pre-pandemic, but annual meetings, lobby days, other events. We make plans with whoever's putting the video together. Where are all your voices going to be at one time, or a good chunk of them? And then we can set up a camera there, and we can work with you to identify who the best people are to talk to, and then we sort of have the ability to get a lot of people in one space with one camera, and have a lot of different people telling their story, why they're here, why the issue is important to them, the work they're doing to advocate for it, why decision makers should care about it. We can get a lot of different voices at once. And that's a great approach. But another way to find the voices is don't be afraid to use your webcam, and that's something we've done a lot of over the last 6 months. And in some ways, it's better because you don't have to worry about location and travel. You're able to get almost everybody now is familiar with how a webcam works. That's one of the things that's happened over the last 6 months. So getting people in front of the webcam to tell their story is you're able to collect a lot more diverse voices now because of that. Obviously, the quality is not as great as it would be with a professional camera setup, but what we're really trying to do is content will trump quality all the time. If quality content will trump quality technical specifications every time, because what we really want to hear are the stories from people when we put these advocacy videos together, and the webcams are a great way to capture those. And then when you do find the right voices, make sure you brief them on the goal of your video, what you're trying to do, but don't script them. If we script people, they sound scripted. If you tell people, we're trying to make a video to explain why this issue is important, we want to let Congress know why we're here today, and get them talking. And the thing about when you're getting people to tell their story on video, the key is just to get them talking about the video, about why it's important to them. I mean, to get them on video telling their story, why it's important to them. Just keep them talking, keep them, ask follow-up questions, get them to keep telling their story, because the more you get out of them, the more you have to work with. So it's always easy. You can always cut video. You can't make new video when you're in the editing bay. So the more you can get from them, the better. I don't know how many times what was sort of a question we ask is, do you have anything else you want to tell us? And sometimes that's where the gold is. And you thought you were done with the video, and you ask one question that's sometimes a throwaway question, but sometimes you get the best answers from that. So the idea is to get them comfortable and get them talking. So I want to show the next slide is an example of one of our clients is the National Center for Learning Disabilities, and several months ago there was a push to waive IDEA waivers, which are for students with learning disabilities, because people were learning from home, so there was a lot of challenges there. So we were working with them, like, who are the best people to tell the story about why this is important? And for this as an example of, we had a group of young adults who had graduated, but they came on camera and they talked about how when they were in K through 12 and the learning disability they had, and with their IDEA, they were able to graduate and become productive members, productive citizens, and it'd be a shame if the students today weren't able to have that same opportunity. So for this, we used the people to tell the story were the people who had been there and who are now successful and wanted to tell their story about without getting the help that they got, they wouldn't be where they are today. So this is just one example of finding the right voice to tell that story. So when you think about who is the best, who your target audience is, and who are the best people to tell that story, make sure that you find the voices that you think are gonna resonate. Another thing to keep in mind when you're planning your video is, what style of video do you want to have? And this is really important because, especially if you're doing multiple types of video, multiple shoots, you kind of have to have a consistent style. And there's a few different types. There's direct to camera. There is an interview style. Sometimes we do animations as well, and sometimes there's a hybrid. You also need to think about how long do you want your video to be. Are you doing a longer mini documentary style that's going to be 20 something minutes long, or are you doing more of a short take that's going to be something that you're going to promote on social media that's more in the minute and a half to 3 minute range? There's lots of times there's the right answer for that. Depends on who your target audience is and what your goal is, like we talked about earlier. But making sure you go in knowing how long your video is going to be and what style of video you're shooting. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. This one is direct to camera. And what we did here, and this is back, we actually showed this in a previous slide, but this video is where the person is talking directly to the camera, which is in sense talking directly to the viewer. So it's much more intimate. It's more one-on-one. This person is telling their story directly to you and wants you to, they're trying to convey the emotion of why this issue matters to them. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video. Apologies if it comes through a little jerky over the connection here, but you get the idea of a direct-to-person video from watching this.
I'm a nonverbal learning disability, and I'm proud to represent the 1 in 5 with learning and attention issues. My IDEA matters, as I'm grateful for the K-12 educators who never let my learning disability define my success. It is with the support and assistance of the amazing educators who taught me that my LD is just one aspect of my identity, not a hindrance, rather a uniqueness of who I am.
So you saw with that one, that was, it was a short clip, direct to video. One thing we did with that, you probably noticed that we filmed that was filmed via webcams. We filmed that a few months ago. So the quality is not as great as it would have been if we had a real professional camera setup, but the story's still there and the issue's still there, and her passion about the issue comes through. So it doesn't really matter how great the video is. If the story's great and the content's good, you can still tell that story. So the next video I want to show, this is more interview style, and this is one that we filmed pre-COVID, so we're able to use this is a advocacy video on Capitol Hill, and I won't show the whole thing, but I wanted to show you this because this one we talked about the storyboard. And for this one, we laid out a storyboard, and we wanted to get shots of Capitol Hill. We wanted to make sure we had a lot of shots of inside Senate office buildings. We wanted to show our advocates walking. We wanted to show some of the shots of the meeting that was taking place. So we captured a lot of that with B-roll, but then we did interviews with a number of people. And you can see the style of interview here is more interview. It's more of an interview style instead of direct to camera. So I'll play a little bit of this so you get the idea.
We are here in Washington today to advocate for issues that impact nursing and impact healthcare in the United States. It's so important for nurses to raise their voice in support of issues that will improve care.
As a nursing leadership organization, this is one argument, one voice that we're talking with that can really help guide our elected officials to do the right thing for the sake of nursing as a whole.
Okay, so I won't play the whole video, but you get the idea there that we're talking about an interview style where the camera's set up and the person is not looking directly at the camera, but instead they're looking at the production assistant or whoever's asking the question. So we set that up in such a way that there's somebody off camera asking questions. Why are you here? Why is it important to advocate for these issues? What do you want Congress to know? So those are the kind of things we do in those videos. And then we also make sure that we shot enough video of people on Capitol Hill and in the Senate office buildings and at their event, so we could set the scene for this advocacy video. Another style of video that we do is animation, and this one is good and bad in a lot of ways. I mean, everything's good and bad in a lot of ways, but this is great because you don't need to be on location. You can be wherever you want to be because you're animating it, so you don't have to worry about being anywhere. But it's a little more labor intensive because you can't just show up and film. You actually have to have somebody create the animation in the video. Lots of times we do a hybrid where we will mix two things together. So I'll play this for a few seconds just to give you an idea of what animation looks like.
Things are going right, the job you love, the neighborhood that's fun, and of course, Max, your dog. Life is, well, pretty awesome. Until it's not. But that's why you have a backup plan, like car insurance or phone insurance. It lets you get back to awesome.
So again, I won't play the whole video, but you get the idea. So the good thing about this type of video is that you don't need to be on location. You can, we have scenes here that it'll be impossible to film. Here we're at the beach. We're at a flat tire. We had a broken phone. You can come up with more creative ideas through an animation. But again, it goes back to the beginning. Like, what's your goal? Who's your target audience? What's the best message for that target audience? And then developing a creative piece from there. The last thing to think about before I turn it over to Matt to talk through some of the production considerations is the location. When you're putting together your plan for making a video, we talked through like what style of video, who's going to tell the story. That last slide we talked about animation where we didn't need to worry about location, but if you are filming it, you need to work in person. You need to worry about your location. Are you going to be shooting this inside a conference room at a facility? Are there multiple locations? Is it going to be outside? Each one of these, each place you film has its own unique challenges. Especially if you're filming on Capitol Hill, there's all sorts of restrictions on where you can go and what you can do and what you can film and what you can't. So you need to consider that out when you're thinking about creating a storyboard for your advocacy video. Who's going to be on the video? How are you going to make sure that you're set up in such a way, physically set up in such a way to take care of that. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Matt, who's going to talk through our production considerations. So Matt.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So for the day of the shoot, some things we have to consider ahead of time. Obviously, how many people are going to be on the shoot, but mainly how do we figure that out, right? So the questions we need to ask to decide, for example, I did all of the nursing video myself because we had an entire day to work with. We had plenty of time for the B-roll. We had plenty of time for the interviews, but I also had a production assistant that was serving as the person conducting the interviews. Now, there's plenty of times where that same type of shoot, I would have wanted some extra assistance. And a couple of the things just to consider are knowing that a good camera person, videographer, who's also does well with people and has interview experience can do the interviews. Some reasons that might not be the best for certain days. Two main things, and it comes down to the content and who you're speaking with, and also the amount of time. If there's a situation where you want multiple people to be mic'd up at once in case it's a conversation, and there's not a lot of turnaround time, a good camera person knows how to use microphones, knows how to use lavalier or lapel mics, but there might just not be enough time for setup and breakdown in between key shots from Mike's storyboard example, and that's when you might want an audio professional. So again, each new person, like Mike mentioned, might add to the budget, but if time's really a consideration and you're not paying for multiple shoot days, sometimes the best value is to have a crew that can do 2 or 3 jobs fast at the same time. One other consideration before we move slides is it a sensitive topic? I do lots of interviews by myself, but while I'm operating the camera, but if there is a type of story being captured that's very intimate and it involves a one-on-one relationship with someone from your organization's team and that particular person, then it might just help the interview go a little more smoothly if a familiar face with a relationship that's already there is asking the questions. And last thing is, what is the look? Is it a very tricky lighting situation that really needs to kind of be set up in advance, as we'll get to, coupled with not a lot of time? Because again, I can set up lights, but if we only have half an hour or an hour to do that and I'm in charge of the visuals, I might want that person that's good with lighting as a specialty to be working on that while I set up the camera if I don't have that extra hour to do both jobs. So it all comes down to the look, who you're speaking with, and then the day's actual time frame. And that's how you can work backwards and find the best crew or single person. So camera and equipment, if we can go to the next slide. Mike covered a lot of these, but just to reiterate, what is the style? Everything can be done with a phone. As far as when I say everything, everything can be captured with a phone, but that limits its style. If the look is very authentic, self-captured video like we're in the era of in 2020, then the phones can work. But if it's also to stylize it, to give it a certain aesthetic and color, cameras that aren't phones allow for a certain leeway in the editing process, and you can really customize a video or a video campaign to look very unique to a certain style, whether that's a color scheme, whether that's a certain texture, whether it's to make it look more film-like, like it was almost a real movie, or the complete opposite. The goal might be to do a complete phone campaign, as a lot of organizations are doing in a year like this. But knowing what the texture you want and having some examples of the final editing can help your crew decide what equipment to use to make sure that you use the proper gear to allow the editor to actually reach that visual goal. And regardless, unless it's a specific look that you want it to be handheld and floating, they make tripods for every type of camera, including smartphones. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the year of self-filming. Now, it used to be that it was always recommended too, that if you're going to use your phone, turn it horizontal, but that landscape's changing. Right now, it's actually sometimes desirable to have a campaign that involves vertical filming, because it just matches that social media / kind of do it yourself in a year where everybody's kind of just making do. A lot of people are actually requesting vertical video. There's still nothing wrong with horizontal. It'll always look a little more traditional. But the main thing doesn't have as much to do with whether it's horizontal or vertical. That's just a decision you make up front, but it's good to match those. It's a little jarring if you kind of go from vertical to horizontal all in the same video. So making that decision up front and staying consistent is the main point. But then it's really goes back to, yes, we're using our phone, but how is it about creating a good frame and a good lighting for the subjects that are being filmed? And also just knowing that the biggest limitation with a phone is the audio quality. And they do make plugins for your phone. They make cheap little microphones that can plug into the headphone jack. They make lapel microphones that you can then actually run into the phone as well, and you can even hide those. So there's a lot of options that, even though it'll look like a phone, you can have high quality audio for a very inexpensive setup. Can we go to next slide, please? So our lighting, for this example, we used a very professional 3-point lighting setup, but I will say that totally depends on the amount of space and the amount of available windows. If we're filming and light is completely coming in from one side of the room, that takes out the need a lot of times for a backlight. Or if it's an office where there's simply no way to put a second or third light out of the frame, then you just make do. And the most important is always just having some strategy for getting that nice, good looking, what we call the main key light on a subject. And if you have room for a second or third light and you have the budget and the space to do that, well, then we've given a very simple way to set all the lighting up to really complement all the areas of the room and of a subject's face, and kind of get that nice separation that you see on more high-end productions. But it really isn't always required if you also just kind of play with the light that's already available. And a lot of times, natural light coming in a nice day is way more aesthetically pleasing than using your own light kit if you take the time to really build your frame properly and have that nice light coming in as a main light source. So by no means do you always need 3 lights, but it's nice to just show how they're used if and when you do have the resources for that. The main thing I will say for lighting is, if you're not going to use a smartphone, your camera person, they always just need to be aware of lighting and colors. And this gets into the next slide as well, if you want to go there. Especially in a corporate setting, there's lots of different, can we go to the next slide, please? Yep. So sorry, it was a little lag on my screen. So the ceiling lights might not match the office lights that are more desk level, which also might not match the light coming in. So there's just this technique we always say called white balancing. It's making sure your camera is aware of the mix of light, and also making sure that who's ever filming understands, again, we call it white balancing. Basically making sure your footage doesn't come back with a very yellow or green hue, because that's tough to edit out in the post-production phase, like we'll talk about. Making sure it's just a natural color balance, and then understand that every time you turn an indoor light on and off, you're probably changing the color scheme, and it can be hard to see that on a small camera screen. So it's good to just do that formal process, make sure that every time the lights change, you understand just getting that natural looking color scheme for the light combinations that you use makes all the difference in the edit. The other thing, and this goes back to our smartphone and our laptop filming, the person on the left has the light behind them. We call that being backlit. The light is at your back, self-explanatory, and it creates shadows on your face. And then if you're thinking, well, we can just clear that up and clear the face up in the edit, the problem is that makes the background light even brighter, and it becomes what we call blown out. So it's really important. We'd want that person to be turned around at least part of the way, if not fully. That way, that beautiful natural daylight is coming in through and illuminating their face, as opposed to being behind them and causing these shadows. So this is one thing that we coach on the most, is that it's very easy to kind of look at your screen that you're filming on and saying, oh, okay, my screen's nice and lit. You know, I can see everything there. But that usually means that you're not, and there's too much light behind you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Sound is the other than making sure that you can clearly see the person's face, that's the main subject of the video. Sound quality is most important. People do not forgive patchy, unprofessional sounding audio. It's the era of home video, but you still need to be able to understand people. And again, even if it's a laptop interview, if it's a really important higher end interview, there's microphone plugins that you can coach people through. There's also not necessarily the microphone. It has to do with, is there a fan on? Is there, you know, especially for home filming, we have to remind people, are your appliances all off? Is there an air conditioner that can be turned off just for a half an hour? Things like that make such a huge difference, because what you don't want is something to be on for half of an interview and then kick off, or vice versa, because that dip in audio will be there if you need to cross-cut different sections of an interview. The background hum will be different, and that's what you want to avoid. And then this is something your editor or your camera person would always remind you of, but you always want just a nice sample of everyone being quiet for a couple of seconds to match for the editor. We call that getting room tone, some of this ambient noise. But this really goes back to just making sure, you know, sometimes people don't realize that TV's been on the entire day. And that kind of thing can, you know, even if they're used to it, prompting people to just take a quick lap to make sure that sound can stay consistent before we hit record is a huge piece of this. It sounds simple, but it's actually, before you hit record on the audio is usually the most important piece of the process. And then from there, it's usually smooth sailing. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So I just covered a lot of this, but one thing too, there's video submissions where you ask people to record themselves, but there's also this idea that you can interview people, and we've been doing this very effectively lately. We can control an interview and be the interviewer ourselves, and then cut ourselves out of the video in the edit. Now, this allows for a couple things. It allows you to help coach through the actual framing of the person. Like, for example, for this example on screen, we might want to have the person move a little bit back from the computer and give a little more what we call headroom on top, if that was the desired framing. But we can also give one-pagers and tips that when we're not conducting an interview ourselves, we give people reminders, like make sure the light's not behind you. Make sure that, if we can't see your whole head in the frame, we can't do anything about that when we go to edit. And also making sure, and we can go to the next slide, that we're eye level. And if it's someone that is filming on their computer, making sure that, especially if it's a laptop, just elevating that laptop and not looking for that angle, that it might not matter in meetings, but when we're turning a meeting or an interview into a real video for your organization, that angle of having a laptop on a lower desk or a coffee table does get a little jarring when it's not a meeting, but it's really a video you're looking to market. So we've done everything from just taking a stack of books, taking trays, anything that can get that eye line a little bit more in line with the computer screen, as opposed to that downward angle. It's something that will be overlooked by the people participating if you don't just put those friendly reminders out. And then again, just coaching people on eye contact. Like for most of us, looking at that little light as opposed to the middle of the screen is eye contact, and that can make a big difference in your video if a more direct to the audience vibe is how you want to best get your message across. And then also just helping coaching people through. You don't want too much going on in the background. Neutral doesn't mean a blank wall, but it just means you don't want things that are absolutely distracting. And that's something, again, if you're conducting an interview, you can coach people through. But if not, you want to just kind of put these pointers on a little one-pager. And then, just good posture. All these reminders that might sound like common sense are always worth reminding. Sound, lighting, and posture and framing are just things to walk through with people. And you do that, and it gets a really, really good product for people that are still hitting the record button themselves, from their homes or their offices. So, and thank you all for your time. Mike, ready to pass it on to you, but I'll stay on here as well.
Editing. I think I was muted. I was saying thank you, Matt. We're going to talk. I'm going to go through the last slides here. I'm going to talk through editing quickly. So this is post-production is after you're done filming and then getting into the editing process. So what we do is we review everything that we filmed, and we start writing down time codes of what we think are great clips that then we can then pull out and start to piece together in a way that tells a story. And again, we want to go back and think about what was the goal of our video, what was our message, what clips do we have that best deliver on our goal, that best tell our message, and that best resonate with our target audience. And then we work with our editor, and Matt is our editor for a lot of these. Sometimes, if you're doing it yourself, sometimes you're the editor, but you want to be able to find the clips from everything you filmed and try to piece together the narrative that helps tell the story and helps advance your issue and delivers your core message to your target audience. Some things to think about quickly is whenever you have people on screen, you need to be able to introduce them. So that's something we call lower thirds, and that's because it's on the lower third of the screen. So this is something we put together for one of our clients, and you can see, we had a style for how he was going to be put on screen. So that's something you just want to have consistent. So anybody who you have on the screen, at some point you want to make sure you introduce who they are, so people watching the video have context. We also do a lot of work in creating animations or graphics that can also be interwoven within the video. And this is great when you're trying to make a point through your video. And sometimes like earlier in the slide, we talked about how video is such a, earlier in the presentation, how video is such a visual medium, and that visuals can convey a lot of information so much quicker and faster. And sometimes even within a video, you want to use a quick graphic to show. And this is something we put together for one of our clients, and they wanted to talk about the issues that matter to them. So instead of having somebody get on screen and talk about the 3 issues that matter to them, we were able to sort of make an animated slide that we're able to put into the video that showed it in a much more succinct and easy to remember way. Last thing to think about here when you're doing editing is the music, and that can make a huge impact on the video. Music really sets the tone of the video, the pace of the video, the tone, the emotions that you're trying to convey. So much emotion is conveyed through the sound and the music. We've done a lot of videos where we sort of have a somber tone as people tell their stories, and then as they talk about the advocacy work they're doing, we pick up the tempo, and you get pulled along in that story. You're brought in, and you're listening to these stories that these patient advocates are telling, if it's a patient advocacy group. And the music changes as they talk about why they're in Washington and their hope for the future and why they're advocating. And then it sort of hits a crescendo at the end when it's like the call to action, and that's where we need you to come in and do something. So without the music, it's still those stories are still powerful, but that music and that editing ties it all together, and it sort of takes you on that journey and tells that story. So you don't have to hire an orchestra. There's lots of sound libraries to work with to find the music that works, and you can piece it together, and you piece it together in a way that matches the length of your video and bring it up as you need to bring it up. So there are sound libraries, and we can share those as part of the follow-up here. Some of the ones that we work with to find the right tone for the presentation. The last piece before we open up to more questions is just distribution. So after you've done all this work, you've thought about from your beginning of your goal and your storyboard and your target audiences and your people that you're going to film and the story you want to tell, and you have this video. That's great. Now what do you do? How do you distribute it? So just a few thoughts on that is, thinking about getting your video seen. It's always the first thing to think about is what distribution channels do you already have? Do you have a Facebook page? Do you have an email list? Do you have a YouTube account? Think through the things you already have control of as an organization. But then to expand that circle, and those are that's the people you already have. But you think about the next level people you want to have, your target audience. Think through strategically of where your target audience is online. What hashtags that they use. You can be strategic and get the media that you produce, not just videos, but everything you produce on social media. If you're strategic with the hashtags and the tagging to reach decision makers and inform larger audiences. So lots of times, we'll for an organization, if they have a Hill Day, for example, they'll have a hashtag specific for that Hill Day, and that hits their immediate target audience. But then they'll use a hashtag that's for the larger issue, and that hits people outside just the people who came to Washington. It hits the much larger issue community. And then we can mention members of Congress or other or media contacts, and that gets them a direct message to them, pings them over social media. So being strategic about you have this great new video. How do you use it? Well, be strategic when you post it on social media and use the hashtags and these sort of built-in tools to get it in front of larger audiences. And then sometimes to do that, you can also need to you filmed all this video and you've made this piece, but sometimes you need to make a edit that's maybe a 30-second edit for one of the platforms, or if you're doing promoted work, if you're going to put money behind it on advertising, sometimes you need to have a very specific length of a video or under a specific length to promote that. So you may need to make different edits of your main video, but again, you want to have the same message come through just with a different length. So it's all about being flexible with what you've created and creating it in maybe different ways to get it in front of other people via these channels. And that brings me to the last slide is, you've filmed all this footage, and you've probably, lots of times you don't use nearly half of it in your final piece. But some of the things you've created are really good. They just don't work with what that final, production piece you wanted to make. Use that for other things. Make short vignettes from it. If you have a video with multiple stories being told, maybe drill down into one and make one short video, sort of like that one I showed you earlier with a young woman talking about her learning disability. You make one short video, make animated GIFs, make infographics, and layer them into infographics. There's lots of things you can do with all the footage that you've created, even if you don't use it in the final package. So, you've put a lot of time and effort and resources into collecting all this stuff. There's other things you can do it, from pulling still images to creating Instagram stories, TikTok videos, whatever platforms you're on. You've collected all this stuff. Now the time is to start thinking strategically about what can I do beyond the video I created. What else can I make from all this great stuff I've collected? So that's it for what I have today. Thanks for your time and attention. I think we have a little time for some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike and Matt. That was fantastic. I know I learned a lot. Thinking as many of us do virtual fly-ins, I think these are great tips for your members to make sure they're ready if they're having to use their computer. Also, if you're on an online panel or doing a recording, I thought the lighting and sound tips were just really helpful. If anyone has any questions, put them in the chat box, but I will, just to kick us off, a lot of us are actually filming on Capitol Hill, maybe even doing recording or taking a picture on Zoom. And you said there were some things to avoid on Capitol Hill, or to be wary of. Do you mind mentioning some of those?
Sure, I can talk to a few of those. I know normally you cannot film inside a member of Congress's office. So if you think you're going to have the shot of your group meeting with even the staff, lots of times they don't like that. Or if they do it, they allow it for B-roll only, so you can't have any audio. So we've done shots where we get to go inside a member of Congress's office, and maybe the member of Congress is meeting with people, but they'll only allow us to get a shot that we use for B-roll, no audio, just to set the scene that they met with that group. They won't record, what they're talking about or any of that stuff. So, and then sometimes you just can't get those inside the members' offices filming at all. Also, tripods inside Capitol Hill are really hard to work with for a variety of reasons, security reasons. So, but we haven't had any problems. And Matt, who's on the call with us today, he's been with me a number of times. And if you just bring in a bag and a camera, that's usually no problems. If it's a one-man, video production crew. But if you're bringing in lights, tripods, things like that, those are really hard to get through without prior clearance.
And I think the one thing I would add to that is that if you need tripod shots, you can hop around Capitol Hill and get those tripod shots, but you just have to be prepared that at certain points of that day, someone might tell you to not use the tripod if you happen to set up shop near like the park police or Secret Service or whatnot. So it's not that you can't do them. We had a lot of nice tripod shots. It's happened many times, but especially not just inside the building, outside, they can quote certain regulations. Lots of times they don't even care and they'll wave to you, but just be aware that you might have to have a contingency plan here and there.
And that's helpful. We do have a question from the audience from Sasha. See, how do you measure the impact or success of a video?
That's a good question. I think there's the what I call vanity metrics, where you can look at like the views and the shares and the likes and the things like that, which are they're a metric to see how far wide it's being distributed. But I think lots of times when we're creating videos, we're creating them for advocacy purposes, for public affairs purposes. So what we're really trying to do is move the needle on an issue, or get more people to actually do something about it. It's not, creating a great video is wonderful, but at the end of the day, our jobs aren't creating great videos. Our jobs are advancing issues for our clients. So the things that we look at are sort of the same metrics that we look at for other things. Is like, are we getting more people to, for our clients that use the video as a call to action? Is can we tie new registrations, new advocacy actions, sending letters to Congress, sharing stories, sharing the video on social media. Like, can we share those sorts of, can we tie those sorts of metrics back to the video? And a good example of this is we there's a lot of times what we'll do for a client is we'll create one of these videos and then they'll use it in a call to action, an email call to action or a social media call to action, and they'll put out that call to action with that video. There's ways you can then trace, you can drive them to a landing page that has a unique identifier that you can say the people who took action from this video, we can trace back to our grassroots platform. So for us, it's tracking if we can tie back actions that advance the cause, advance the issue to that video. That's one of the things we look at to see if it was successful or not.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know we're out of time. If you don't mind advancing it one more slide.
Sure.
I encourage, sorry, maybe one more. There we go. If anyone has anything they would like to see on upcoming webinars, topics you want to learn about, please feel free to reach out to any of us at BIO. We're happy to help. There'll also be a survey we will send out, and I hope you can fill it out. Let us know what you thought. And next one will be actually on October 15th at 4 p.m. Where we're going to focus on grassroots engagement. So I hope you can join us. And also, please look out. We're going to have a tip sheet for using a video on your computer that will have many of the things you heard today, just as kind of a one-stop shop to look at. And lastly, we are also very excited. We just revamped our website for our Alliance work, and all the webinars are posted online. So I will chat the link in just a minute for everybody, but please feel free to access the webinars at any time. This one will be posted probably in a few weeks, but thank you again for attending. And as always, please feel free to reach out. Have a great rest of the day.